do you get the sense that this is a move on principle, a belief on principle on the part of Mark Zuckerberg, or is it the effort to preserve protection under Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act?
I think it's a bit of both, if we're being honest. I think that clearly Mark Zuckerberg has staked out a lane where he has said that, the second they get in the business of trying to figure out what is the truth and what isn't, it's going to become very complicated and invariably almost becomes a losing proposition. I also think he has created a bit of a nuance in terms of how he's approaching some of this with how Jack Dorsey is approaching this, insofar as he's saying, look, we're not going to police everything, but when it comes to voter suppression, when it comes to your health and potentially danger, we'll step in those cases, but we don't plan to step in on everything. And to the extent we're going to step in on those things, you're already even seeing a distinction between how Jack Dorsey might be doing that in the case of Trump's tweets about voter by mail, for example, where Jack Dorsey is clearly looking at that and that company looking at that and saying that maybe could be considered some kind of voter suppression issue, and therefore they want to allow other facts to come out around it. And I think inside Facebook, they're looking at that tweet and saying that's more of a debate. There's a debate about whether vote by mail is going to create fraud. And I know there's a vigorous debate about that and sort of how they're both going to treat those issues.
Steve, we were just showing Jack Dorsey's tweet saying this doesn't make us the arbiter of truth, but effectively it does. I mean, the minute that you question something that somebody puts on that platform, you are, in essence, planting a seed of doubt in anybody's minds, and effectively you are playing the role of arbiter of truth. Why would Jack Dorsey want to wade into that controversy, particularly when social media platforms are really depending on remaining protected by this so-called Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that Section 230 isn't necessarily a free pass. There are lines drawn, and these companies are kind of drawing their own lines, like Andrew was just talking about. It's things like health and safety. We've seen them be much more aggressive, fact-checking things related to the COVID-19 pandemic, increasingly so on vaccines. So the health thing is very important, harm and danger. And in Twitter as a special case versus Facebook, they've literally created a world leaders rule around this that effectively gives world leaders a blank check to say things that a normal Twitter user like you and I cannot say. It has to be like an imminent threat of harm to someone. So these things that Trump is tweeting, they can fact check it and they're okay to fact check it. And they feel like it's worth fact checking that kind of thing. But in general, something that would get all these calls to get Trump booted off Twitter, for example, just doesn't apply to him. They literally wrote a new rule just for Trump.
Andrew, I'm curious to whether or not Facebook, if Zuckerberg believes that he is immune from whatever comes of the president's executive order and the aftermath of that.
I don't think I don't think that Facebook feels immune from any of this. I don't think any of the social media giants feel that they're immune from it. And I think the political will out there on this issue is so stark, and it actually represents a potential challenge to these businesses, because you can imagine the kinds of lawsuits that could come if in fact something like this gets put into place. So no, I don't think that they're immune. I think that the issue is, again, how far do they go and how often you're going to see them take steps. I think it's going to get very interesting in the next couple of months as we get closer and closer to the election, for example, if Facebook feels like it has to take steps because of things that are said on either side of the aisle, frankly, and then what invariably may or may not happen.